So we're going to do a simple guide to bass fishing, and we're going to let conditions and locations dictate how we fish. We're going to move and we will fish a shallow reef differently to how we'd fish current, for example, and hopefully through the course of this we'll build up a picture of how you might approach different marks where you fish. We are on the southwest coast of Ireland, and this is what I love about bass fishing. You charge around, and by the nature of the ground you are forced to fish differently everywhere you go. We've got, I don't know what you call them, traditional rock marks, you know, rock onto sand. We've got boulder fields, we've got shallow reefs, we've got current, and if the surf gets up, if the swell gets up, we got surf fishing. This is bass fishing. You got to move, you got to think on your feet, and you got to adjust the lures and the techniques to very much match the ground you're fishing. This is why we carry these radios, because when you're bass fishing, you can be a long way apart. John's just radioed to say he's got fish feeding on the surface. He must be what, 300 yards away? He said, get over here, so we're gonna go. Don't run across the rock. So I get horribly overexcited. Don't run, because you will fall on your backside. John was fishing about 50 yards that way and saw bait spraying out of the water, you know, big swells from bass. So he called me on the radio and said, get over here. So I've got a small surface lures on. It's very, you know, it's not rough here. You obviously can see the calm conditions, really subtle lure. To see if we can get, I'll give it 2 or 3 chucks with a surface lure, and then if I get no joy, I'll go subsurface with a soft plastic. Because if you've got bait around, I just saw a fish move there. If you can hear a thumping sound through the microphone, that's my heart going at an unnatural rate. She's so important in bass fishing. You know, when you've got incredible conditions, you know, like at home I love bouncy kind of onshore conditions. Here, of course, I'll take those kind of conditions in certain locations, but there's so much with bass fishing. You want to keep your eyes and your ears open. Look for signs of bait. It could be terns taking sand eels, it could be gannets diving. Just all the time when you're fishing. I know fishing a surface lure, you want to keep your eye on the lure all the time because it's exciting, but just keep scanning. You know, if John hadn't been scanning, he wouldn't have seen those little bits of baits flying out of the water with bass hitting them. There's a big kind of sandy gully running up that way. You can kind of, if I was a bass, which I'm very obviously not, I feel like that's where they'd hang. You know, the bait fish trying to find a bit of cover in the weed. The bass know they've got to come out. Can you imagine being a bait fish? I mean, they're terrified. When you've got bass moving on bait, you've got to search that water. You know, they were here, they could be there, they could be there. But when we turned up, when we got out of the car and walked down to the beach, there were a couple of what I call happy terns. You know, those birds, the terns, they're making that lovely kind of happy sound when they're dialed in on food. And they are such a great kind of indicator. If there's food around, there's a good chance there'll be bass around. I'm going to change this lure. I've got a bit of a side wind coming at me here, and John said just try and get a bit of distance on it, so to cover some water. So I'm going to try and find the fish, and the best lure to me for finding fish is either the sand eel pencil or the seeker, because the seeker covers a huge amount of water and it swims shallow. And it's got a lovely kind of intense rolling action. And as much as I love fishing with surface lures, I love, you know, when bass smash off the top. A lure like this lets me cover a lot of water. Yo. I'll just retrieve it like that. And something I picked up from the Scandinavian guys who did this lure, they put a spin stop, they stop on a controlled drop, wind, stop, and that lure's working as it drops. Keep retrieving, like that, stop, keep that line tight, you can feel it working. It's that kind of calm, I can feel that lure working as it drops. You'll see it, you almost like a, oh, get her! You feel like a bit, oh, just got bumped. Sometimes you feel like a bit like a criminal when you're bass fishing because you're kind of furtively glancing everywhere. That was bait. There we go. Oh my God. Oh my God. Come on. Look at it, look on the bait on the water. God, it's lethal. I've been fishing for 42 years. I still can't control myself. Yo! Come and fish. There we go. Oh! You want to search, that seeker is just deadly. It's at that kind of range you said, John. Oh, God, I love it. Yo! I put a big single hook on the end. I don't use a treble. Big single hook. Oh, I love it. I just love it. Thank you so much, fish. Look at that. I'm going to lift the, now when you lift the fish, okay, just gently, like that. Slacken the drag off. Look, that's not a big bass, but I mean, how cool is that? Years ago I gave up worrying about the size of fish. I just like fishing, and I love, these fish are so angry. You know, those, I think there's a bunch of them out there fishing. You know, when you see bait spraying, there's a few more. Yo! Go on, fish. They are, you look after bass, they're really strong. You don't keep them out of the water for ages, you don't need to, but keep them in the water like that. Do your photograph, do your grip and grin, put them back. Oh, I love it. That fish is absolutely nothing to do with me. That is John Quinlan seeing them, telling me where to cast, and I take the glory. Sorry, John. You know how I spoke about, you know, you see bass anglers with these kind of furtive eyes, should always be looking. We've got a little, we had bait busting out here, and then if you keep looking, there's a very small patch of kind of almost like oily slick on the water. That's bait that's being killed, releasing the oil. So you can just see it out there. You just look for that. You know there's been bait killed in the vicinity recently. Oh yes, come on. So you could come to a rock like this. You could come to a mark like, oh, turn diving then. Always looking, just always look. This is what I would call kind of typical bass fishing, but just look. Oh Jesus! Oh, stop it! Probably I get so bloody excited. Look at that, right in there, right in tight. Oh, stop it. Yo. The problem is, you get too excited, you start fishing like an Egypt. Well, I do anyway. Right, just slow and controlled, like that. That turn's tracking my lure. I always kind of think if the turn's tracking my lure, it's looking half right. See the wiggle on that lure. When you slow down, A lot of these hard lures, your natural inclination is to crank the living daylights out of it, which I do. I'm lethal at it. I get overexcited and crank everything. But with this sea bass minnow, if you just cast like this, there's nothing hectic, just let the lure load like that, and then rod tip up, and just like that. Bear in mind this is a small reel, I think it's a 5.1 retrieve, so it's fishing nice and shallow, and it's really wiggling from the back. The lure, not me. I don't mind a wiggle, but I like the lure wiggling. The water is so clear. I had this before the lads filming turned up yesterday. I went out fishing, and when I changed to the smaller gravity stick pulse tail, I was fishing the paddle tail, which I think was thumping too much in the calm water. I changed to the pulse tail, and bang, first chuck, bass. So let's see if it happens today. Oh yes! First cast with a pulse tail. It's a small fish, but first chuck. It's that kind of slow retrieve. Honestly, the pulse tail, the body of the lure doesn't move, the tail just pulses. It's not the biggest, but see that lure, it so often happens, you change a lure and you get a fish. Thank you, fish. It happened yesterday before you guys arrived, before the filming lads arrived. Nothing. Changed lure to something more subtle to kind of, I think reflect the conditions. More subtle, bang. And that was first chuck with that. You saw that. There was absolutely no skullduggery on camera. That was first chuck, bang, lure change. Oh. Yeah. I had a situation a couple of years ago at home when we found sprat feeding a long way out, and bass were absolutely killing them. And luckily I had one white seeker in my lure box, and I vowed from then never to go out without at least one lure that can cover a lot of water. Just if I'm getting nothing tight in, like I've seen a gannet just then dive further off, so I'm just put the seeker back on, because it absolutely flies. I can cover a lot of water because that bait's moving. You try and find out where you use it. Well, the seeker's a good name because I'm seeking. I'm looking for the fish. I'm looking for the bait, and it lets me cover it. It's a very simple metal, but it casts a long way and swims very shallow. And just sometimes you need that range, or you need that kind of fanning out of the cast. When you've got bait around, I think you get whiplash. You're always scanning like that. Can you see any bait jumping out of the water? Can you see birds diving? Can you see flashes of bass? You know when they flash on their side like mullet do? Sometimes you see that. Do you get hit, Richard? Really? Yeah. So that's another thing. When you're fishing with other people, watch them. You know, I see a number of anglers, a number of what I call experts who kind of know it all. They don't watch other anglers, especially when I would guess now the three of us here are fishing three different techniques. You know, when you're on your own, great, if there's fish everywhere, you catch them, that's brilliant. When you're with other anglers, keep an eye, because someone at some point will make a lure change, they'll try a different technique. if they hit fish, you know, you're almost using it to try and suss out where the fish are, what the fish want. Yeah, so when I talk about whiplash, now I'm looking for bait. I'm watching John and Richard how they're fishing, because at some point you fancy someone's going to switch on to what they want, or they'll find the fish in front of them, call you in. You know, if I suddenly had a heap of bass in here, I'll shout to the guys, say, come on, come on in, come on in, come on in. It's a very kind of visual, involved way of fishing. We've moved about a quarter of a mile maybe to a spot that John likes. It's a bit of a weird spot, but it's rock onto sand. It's pretty shallow at the moment, but we know there's bait around, and we're trying to see if we can find that bait again. See if we can find. So I'm fishing the seeker again, because I'm trying to search, trying to get an idea where the bait might be, where the fish might be, and then kind of specialise from there. And because it's a sandy bottom here, one technique that does work well here is bumping the bottom with, you know, the Savage Minnow and the Sand Eel V2, the Weedless. You know, hop the bottom, see if I can find the fish, find the bait. The little patch of oil out there that's you know, is killed bait. Okay, I'm going to change my technique now. I've had 3 or 4 chucks. That seeker covers a lot of water, but because I can see patches of weed that was blown in on the storms, but I've basically got clear sand, and I'm going to put a lure on the bottom and then work it deliberately on the bottom. I'm going to put the Savage Minnow, but I'm actually going to put the bigger one on, the Savage Minnow Weedless. It's very much like what you do in a current of an estuary sometimes, but I haven't got current here. So I'm relying purely on feel and me working the lure. Just whack it out, stop, let it hit the bottom, you'll feel a tap. Boom, there you go. I'm on the bottom, and just sink and draw. I bump the bottom then. Boom. It's great when you got very little wind, you can feel everything. You feel that tap come up, go down with the lure, tap like that. It'll often be, when you're fishing like this, when you're bumping the bottom, it'll often be you'll get that tap on the bottom, and then you get a tap, bang from a fish. And the way the lure is designed, obviously, the Savage Minnow Weedless and the Sand Eel V2 Weedless, you can hop him. Literally, I'm kind of visualising the lure going up on the draw, down on the sink, up, and I'm almost right there, boom. Then I get close in, just retrieve it. Obviously you can whack these lures out, wind them in. You know, they work great like that, but I do like, you know, if I can't find the fish, it's easy to walk away sometimes without working hard to the bottom. And also, when you cast out, that first cast, when that lure hits the water, it's fishing. So control that first drop. You find this, especially when you go pollock fishing out on the rocks, sometimes you find people don't concentrate on that cast and the first drop. But when you cast out, that lure hits the water, it's fishing on the drop. You will probably find me saying this about every single place we go, but this to me is, this is bass fishing. I love this kind of, I've got the wind in my face. I've got that bit of chop, that bit of white water. The water's really green and fizzed up. And this is your classic kind of boulder field. This is Snag City. And I can approach this in a bunch of different ways. I'll show you. I'm gonna start off again with a Weedless soft plastic, the gravity stick, so I can get through all those holes and those gullies in between the boulders. But I'll try top water, I'll try shallow divers, I might try the sandy old pencil. But this is, to me, if someone does describe bass fishing, this to me is it. I'm just gonna change the colour of my smaller gravity stick paddle tail to this slightly darker back, the hollow, I think it's called the hollow ghost colour, because look, I love white lures in really bright sunshine. And earlier on I sort of slapped the sun cream on, but now we've got, it's bright, but it's quite overcast conditions. And I increasingly like this colour in overcast conditions. And I've got it on the belly weight hook. It's the 4.0 hook designed for the lures with the belly weight. I think we'll get them, but I think it's because as tide starts to go out, I really kind of...
How long before that happens?
I think it's about now. I'm just going to check the exact time I tide water, okay? It's too nice, it's just, it's lovely. You beauty! Yeah. This is the film crew fishing. They've landed they've hooked the first bass from this spot. Ed, what's up? Just, you stay stable, Ed, you stay stable. Oh God.
Happy with that?
Well done. That's on that sea Bass Minnow 140. You beauty. You absolute beauty. Is that your first Irish bass?
Yeah. Very happy with it.
Just pull that head down slightly, just with the fish. That's him. Just bend the head down slightly. Bend the head down the fish. Then let the body go and just bring the head down. It looks nicer. If you ever find yourself fishing shallow reefs, kind of shallow bouldery ground like this, human logic says, oh, the bass are always going to come in with the tide. Now, I understand that, and I fish a lot of marks on the flood, but I do like, if I came here for the first time ever, and I came at low tide, scout the ground out, came to fish it, I would personally come here for high water and start fishing the tide down. And then you start kind of cancelling out your odds. I do like ebb tide on these kind of marks. It's nice when you're fishing a lure like this. Oh, it's a rock. Like this sea bass minnow, it wants to dive, let's say, I'm kind of guessing, but it's a regular hard lure, casts pretty well, quite grippy. It probably, on a standard straight retrieve, it probably wants to dive, I don't know, let's say that deep, what's that? 50, 60 centimeters? But I like forcing lures like this, especially here in this, rough as hell ground. I like forcing lures like this to swim that bit shallower. And all I do is cast out, rod tip up, and slowly retrieve down. The faster you retrieve, the better that lure is going to grip and the deeper it's going to go. So I slow up, rod tip up. See, then I felt the lure bouncing across the top of the rocks. If I was retrieving much faster with the rod tip down, there's a high chance that lure's going to get snagged, which in the end of the day is why we buy them. You know, we buy them to catch fish. But if you can not lose a lure, so much the better. And I also think a lot of these hard lures, when you slow them down with the rod tip up, I think it kind of increases the action. You know, I don't understand the kind of dynamics as such, but it seems to really kind of increase that wiggle on the lure. Which, you know, if you're going to fish a hard lure like this, you're after it because it's giving you a lot of action. The soft plastics are far more subtle. But Ed, our cameraman, he landed a bass fishing this lure, so I've kind of stolen the rod back, and I'm obviously going to keep this lure on for a while because it caught bass. It's also quite a good way of kind of almost, see then I bounce, you're kind of, even with a hard lure and a couple of sets of trebles, you're slightly kind of, there's very little weed here, this is all boulders really. You're kind of almost feeling your way over the shallower rocks. You know how well it is mine, you know when you come to a mark like this, your natural inclination is to fish out there. There's a lot of ground, almost like parallel to me. I've gone back to the weedless soft plastic, the gravity stick paddle tail. I was just trying to pick up a bit of weed, but also I'm going to try and fish these boulders in here and almost slide that lure in on the waves, use the action of the waves to help me fish the lure. Because I can guarantee you at some point there will be bass behind me. You've got a lot more ground to cover if you do that and not just that. This water is beautiful. See, that's sliding in now on the wave. Oh, come on. So that's a couple of different bass marks, but as you've seen, there's nothing complicated about this. We're just trying to kind of marry up our approach with the ground, and then if nothing happens, you chop and change. But almost the best bit about here, this mark here, was I wanted to check the exact time of high water to see if we were just into that ebb tide. So I put my kit down, went to my bag, checked the tide times. Also, okay, I actually checked the cricket score as well. Ed picked up my rod and caught a bass. And I checked the times, and it was on the first of the ebb tide, which is often, as I said, come to these really bouldery marks. If you're going to fish them for the first time, I would try that outgoing tide. But look, you've seen the methods, the techniques. There's nothing complicated. Don't be afraid of any of this. Just go out, check the ground out, and have a crack. I'm going to deliberately fish the bottom and see if I can find any bass rooting in amongst the boulders. You look at ground like this and you think, oh, if I fish the bottom, all I'm going to do is lose lures. But if you maintain contact, use the right lure, your actual lure loss will be minimal. I'm fishing the Savage Minnow Weedless, the cotton candy colour, because I love cotton candy. And all I'm going to do is cast out. I felt it hit the bottom. Yeah. Oh, you could not. I'm going to cast out into the biggest snag in the entire bay and lose the frigging lure first cast. Don't, please, just quiet, because John Quinlan's watching me. He wants to laugh. Look, it does happen. I mean, it has to happen sometimes, but preferably not when you're doing a piece to camera. I did this lovely setup. You don't use many lures doing this if you're careful. Cast out snag.